Hi, my name is Estela Flores, and I'll be talking about the Amendment 16 to 18, the 22nd, and the 26th. First, I'll be talking about the 16th Amendment. Okay, the 16th Amendment is the Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on the income from whatever sources diverted without appointment among the several states and without regard to any censors or enumerations. The historical backgrounds on why the amendment was needed. However, its history actually goes back even further. During the Civil War, Congress passed the Revenue Act of 1861, which included a tax on personal incomes to help pay war expenses. The tax was repealed 10 years later. However, in 1894, Congress enacted a flat-rate federal income tax, which was a direct tax not appointed according to the population of each state. The 16th Amendment, ratified in 1913, removed the objection by allowing the federal government to tax the income of individuals without regard to the population of each state. The different people or group of people working towards the amendment. An income tax amendment to the Constitution was first proposed by Senator Norris Brown of Nebraska. He submitted two proposals. Senate Resolution number 25 and 39. The amendment proposed finally accepted was Senate Joint Resolution number 40, introduced by Senator Nelson W. Aldrich of Rhode Island, the Senate Majority Leader and Finance Committee Chairman. The obstacles faced in passing the amendment. This amendment has been the target of a great deal of criticism over the last 100 years, but these objections haven't stood up in court, so the 16th Amendment will most likely to be around for many years to come. Conservatives, hoping to kill the idea for good, proposed a constitutional amendment enacting such a tax. They believed an amendment would never receive a ratification by the 3/4 of the state. Much to their surprise, the amendment was ratified by one of the state legislators after another, and on February 25, 1913 was the certification by Secretary of State Philander C. Knox. The 16th Amendment took effect. The time it took to ratify the amendment. The amendment was ratified by one state legislature after another on February 25, 1913, with the certification by Senator of State Philander C. Knox. The 16th Amendment took effect. The overall impact of this amendment. The 16th Amendment gives the federal government the right to collect income tax. Before the 16th Amendment, the Constitution only allowed Congress to levy taxes against states and not individuals. Okay, that was the 16th Amendment. Now I'll be talking about the 17th Amendment. The 17th Amendment is this amendment should not be so construed as to affect the election of or term of any senator chosen before it becomes valid as part of the Constitution. The historical background on why the amendment was needed. It was part of a wave process constitutional reforms that sought to make the Constitution and our nation more democratic. It gave Americans the right to vote directly from the senators, thereby strengthening the links between citizens and the federal government. The different people or groups of people working towards the amendment. A substitute amendment by Senator Joseph L. Bristow of Kansas provided the direct election of the senators without the race rider. It was adopted by the Senate on a close vote before the proposed constitutional amendment itself passed the Senate. Over a year later, the House accepted the change, and on April 8, 1913, the resolution became the 17th Amendment. The obstacles faced in passing the amendment. The idea did not gain considerable support until the late 19th century, when several problems related to the Senate elections had become evident. Several state legislators deadlocked over the election of senators, which led to Senate's vacancy lasting months and even years. Another obstacle would be about political machines gain control over state legislators, and the senators-elect with their support, were dismissed as puppets, which the Senate was seen as a millionaire club serving powerful private interests. The time it took to ratify the amendment. Passed by Congress May 13, 1912, and ratified April 8, 1913, the 17th Amendment modifies Article Article 1, Section 3 of the Constitution by allowing voters to cast direct votes for U.S. senators. Prior to its passage, senators were chosen by state legislators. The overall impact of this amendment. 17th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, direct election of U.S. senators. Americans did not directly vote for senators for the first 125 years of the federal government. The Constitution, as it was adopted in 1788, started the senators would be elected by state legislators. The 18th Amendment. Section 1. After 1 year from the ratification of this article, the manufacture, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquors within the importation thereof into or the exportation thereof the United States and all the territories subject to the jurisdiction thereof the beverage purpose and hereby prohibition. The historical background on why the amendment was needed. By the late 1800s, prohibition movement has sprung up across the United States, driven by religious groups who considered alcohol, specifically drinking, a threat to the nation. The different people or groups of the people working towards the amendment. On August 1st, 1917, the Senate passed a resolution containing the language of the amendment to be presented to the states for ratification. The vote was 65 to 20, with the Democrats voting 36 in favor and 12 in opposite, and the Republicans voting 29 in favor and 8 in opposite. The House of Representatives passed the revised resolution on December 17, 1917. The obstacles faced in passing the amendment. The causes of the amendment was challenged when the case reaching the U.S. Supreme Court. It upheld the constitutionality of such a deadline in Dillon v. Glass, 1921. The Supreme Court also upheld the ratification of the Ohio legislature in Hockey v. Smith, despite a petition requiring that the matter go to ballot. The time it took to ratify the amendment. The ratification of the 18th Amendment was completed on January 16, 1919, and would take effect on January 17, 1920. It is important to note that the 18th Amendment did not prohibit the consumption of alcohol, but rather simply the safe manufacture and transportation of alcohol beverages. The overall impact of this amendment. Just after the 18th Amendment's adoption, there was a significant reduction in alcohol consumption. Although the general public, and particularly among the lower income group, consumption soon climbed as an underworld entrepreneur began producing rut-gut alcohol. Likewise, there was a general reduction in overall crime, mainly in the types of crimes associated with the effects of alcohol consumption. Although there were significant increase in crimes involved in the production and distribution of illegal alcohol. The 19th Amendment, Women's Suffrage. The right of the citizen of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state and on account of sex. Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. The historical background on why the amendment was needed. In the U.S. Constitution, it granted American women the right to vote, which is now known as the women's suffrage. At the time before the women's suffrage, female citizens did not share all the same rights as men, including the right to vote. The different people or groups of people working towards the amendment. In 1848, the movement for women's rights launched on a national level with a convention in Seneca Falls, New York, organized by abolitionists Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott. Following the convention, the demands for the vote became a centerpiece of the women's rights movement. Stanton and Mott, along with Susan B. Anthony and other activists, formed organizations that raised public awareness and lobbied the government to grant the voting rights to women, including former African American slave and activist Frederick Douglass. The obstacles faced in passing the amendment. In 1869, Stanton and Anthony formed the National Women's Suffrage Association with their eyes on a federal constitution amendment that would grant the woman right to vote. That same year, abolitionists Lucy Stone and Henry Blackwell founded the American Women's Suffrage Association. The group leaders supported the 15th Amendment and feared it would not pass if it included voting rights for women. The American Women's Suffrage Association believed that women enfranchisement could best be gained through amendments to individual state constitution. Even when the division between the two organizations, there was victory for voting rights in 1869 when Wyoming Territory granted all female residents ages 21 in order to right to vote. After a 7-year battle, these groups finally emerged victorious with the passage of the 19th Amendment. So it ended with a win-win for everyone. The overall impact of this amendment. The 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution guaranteed women the right to vote. It passed the Congress and set the states for ratification. The women's suffrage movement was founded in the mid-19th century by the women who had politically active through their work in the abolitionist and temperance movement. Amendment 22nd. It repealed the prohibition. Section 1. The 18th article of the amendment to the Constitution of the United States hereby repealed. The Section 2. The transportation or importation into any state, territory, or possession of the United States for delivering or use therein intoxicating liquor in violation of the law thereof is hereby prohibited. The historical background on why the amendment was important. After Franklin D. Roosevelt died in 1945, many Americans began to recognize that having a president serve more than 8 years was bad for the country. This led to the 22nd Amendment, which passed by Congress in 1947 and ratified by the states by 1951. President Franklin D. Roosevelt died more than 8 years equals bad for the U.S. Meaning that if the president served more than 8 years, it would really make the U.S. look bad, and it wasn't right to give a person with power to still in the office more than 8 years. The different people or groups of people working towards the amendment. Franklin D. Roosevelt. The obstacles faced in passing the amendment. One of the obstacles that was faced was when Franklin D. Roosevelt died in his second term, which got a lot of people thinking on how long can someone stand in the office. There was attempts for repealing the 22nd Amendment, according to the historian Glee W. LaFantesi of Western Kentucky University. Ever since 1985, when Ronald Reagan was serving in his second term of president, there has been repeated attempts to repeal the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution will limit each president to 2 terms. In early 1989, during an exit interview with Tom Brokaw of NBC, President Reagan stated his intention to fight for amendment repeal. However, after being diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in 1994, his presidential ambition had to be scrapped. The time it took to ratify the amendment. Ratification by the request 36 of them, then 48 states, was completed on February 27, 1951. The overall impact of this amendment. Terms limits on the president have had less of an impact than you think. They didn't exist until the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution was ratified in 1951, taking a posthumous shot at Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was elected 4 times to Republican Congress, pushed through the amendment that would limit the president to 2 terms. Amendment 26, Section 1. The rights of the citizens of the United States who are 18 years of age or older to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of the age. Section 2. The Congress shall have power to enforce the article by appropriate legislation. The historical background on why the amendment was needed. The 26th Amendment lowered the voting age from 21 to 18, allowing millions of young people to participate actively in the democratic process and to have a powerful voice in shaping their political future. The different people or groups of people working towards the amendment. President Richard M. Nixon aimed to increase support for a constitutional amendment. Congress passed the 26th Amendment in March 1971. The state promptly ratified it, and President Richard M. Nixon signed it into law that July. The obstacles faced in passing the amendment. In the 1970 case Oregon versus Mitchell, the U.S. Supreme Court was tasked with reviewing the constitutionality of the provision. It took a group of young activists from the National Education Association and their allies to harness the energy of student activists in the 1960s and make the dream a reality. The time it took to ratify the amendment. After an overwhelming House vote in favor, on March 23rd, the 26th Amendment went to the state for ratification. It just took 2 months, the shortest period of time of any amendment in the U.S. history. The necessary 3/4 of the state's legislature, or 38 states, ratified the 26th Amendment that President Nixon signed into law that July. The overall impact of this amendment. The 26th Amendment, old enough to fight, old enough to vote. During World War II, President Franklin D. Roosevelt lowered the minimum age for the military draft age to 18, at a time when the minimum voting age, as determined by the individual state, has historically been 21. And this concludes my presentation on the amendments from 16 to 18, the 22nd and the 26th amendments. That would be all. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it.